Welcome all to the third webinar of the WSCF Global Educational Webinars held in 2024. It is framed in the Identity, Diversity, Dialogue, and Gender Justice program. This webinar has as a title El Buen Vivir, Gender Justice and Inclusion.
So firstly, it is important because we live in a world in which religious fundamentalisms are all over it, and it is a really complex situation for women and LGBTQA plus community. So that is why it's important to start creating dialogues and forums within churches and religious institutions to cultivate sensitive towards gender justice and LGBTQ rights. Also, to increase the capability of CCMs in their fight against gender and intersectional discrimination, and engage the youth proactively in discussions and initiatives towards gender justice and provide them with a platform to speak up for themselves, and to foster biblical and theological reflections that help us support inclusive interpretations of the scripture. So it's in this context that in Latin American and Caribbean region, we create our gender policy. For us, it was very, very important to create it so that it can be a great space for all of us to live and to create a world in which we can be better and be prophetic. So we will start this webinar talking and introducing this gender policy. For that, I will share with you a small PowerPoint presentation. Please let me know if you can watch it.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we entitled our policy Política de Justicia de Géneros e Inclusión para el Buen Vivir. During this webinar, we are going to understand better the context El Buen Vivir. So I will wait a little bit until Lourdes can help us with it. And well, I am going to start talking about our gender policy. Okay, so firstly, I will talk about the reasons of formulating this gender policy. Firstly, it constitutes a common pact of reflection and federative practicals in Latin America and the Caribbean. As a region, for us, talking about gender justice is really, really important. And a lot of our youth communities are talking about this theme. Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Cuba, all of us are talking about gender justice because in our local context is a really huge theme, and it's a really common fight of all women and LGBTQ people. Also, we think that it's very vital for our militancy that is obviously committed to social justice as Christians movements. Also, the essence of WSCF work must include systemic criticism of the order of oppressions, and it's a framework for the inclusions of gender principles. So we are convinced that this policy will contribute to the work culture of the movements, and we are very glad to say that it's the first one in all our federation. So that is why also we would like to share what are our resolutions so that maybe we can create some similar ideas in other contexts, obviously with their own realities. Okay, I have some problems to change off. Okay, so also we are going to talk about highlights and main discoveries during the creation of the policy. It was really interesting because it was a process in which popular education methodology was the most. So it was really important for us to create the policy as a lived process in which all our movements were involved since the first day. How these movements were involved with participatory diagnosis, with workshops to construct the policy together, with some presentations of the policy to the region. Then we create adjustments to this policy between the suggestions that the judge told to us, and then we present the policy to all the region. So in this process, it wasn't only the word of the secretary, of the regional secretary, but the work of all the judges talking about their needs in their own context. This was really a rich process because it involves us to end up with El Buen Vivir, for example. Without this popular education methodology, would be impossible to end up with the name, including El Buen Vivir, for example. So this is one of the main discoveries and the main recognitions of this process that we live. Also, for us, it's important to speak about some of the main results that we have during this policy. For example, we conclude that it's important to have a policy with the recognition of El Buen Vivir that involves the recognition of the knowledge of indigenous peoples of the regions, and also to create a space in which we recognize that us as Latin American and the Caribbean, if we are talking about diversity, not only us talking about LGBTQ plus realities, but also talking about indigenous communities realities. So for us, it was fundamental to create these kind of spaces. Another important main result that we have is to create a policy that always recognizes the diversity of our federation. Well, as I have said before, Latin American and the Caribbean do not exist without the knowledge of the indigenous peoples, but also do not exist without the knowledge of queer people. And as I have said before, the reality of LGBT community, it's really important for us as a region. And we have like showed spaces in our federation locally that are talking a lot about queerness and a lot about the relationship between queer people and God. In the context of religious fundamentalisms, this is a must so that we can create and exchange secure spaces for all the peoples. And also what we are doing right now, or what we are going to do in some weeks from now. Firstly, we are going to start working in our communication media campaign that we are going to start it this Monday on November 25th. And also we are start working in our policy implementation. Nowadays we have the policy, but for us it's really important to start talking about the ways in which we are going to make it real, so that it not only can be written, but it can be in practice. And for that, we are starting nowadays dialogues to talk about this theme and to implement in our own context. Obviously, this involves a lot of speaking with all of us and also being cultural appropriate to each of our local contexts. As a region, we have a lot of diversity in all senses, so it's really important to work with it and to recognize it so that we can implement it the best way possible. And well, that's all for me. I hope that you like could understand generally what are the main points of our gender policy and that it's useful to your own context. Now we are going to watch a small video about the process of creating this policy. Cami, can you help me with it, please? Thank you, Cami.
La FOMEC es una organización que celebra su pluralidad de identidades, de
The
culturas,
World Student Christian Federation is a group that celebrates the
de
diversity
metodologías, de contextos históricos y socioreligiosos,
with various
de
historical
experiencias
context
de
and
los movimientos estudiantiles cristianos.
trying to be a
La
Christian
política
student
institucional
movement
de justicia de géneros e inclusión
with
es
having an institutional
fundamental para
policy for
valorizar
gender
la
justice and
diversidad
inclusion
y
and
los retos que
diversity.
ella
The
plantea
essential,
desde el
it is
respeto.
essential for the value of diversity and the challenges it poses for respect and inclusion.
Todos, todos.
Thanks, Cami. So this was like a really small video.
This was just a very quick video, basically starting about our policy. Now to better understand this concept of El Buen Vivir, we want to invite Lourdes Contreras, who's a specialist on this concept. And so we want to thank her for accepting this.
Camila, ¿me puedes decir cuánto tiempo tengo para respetar los
How
tiempos?
much time do I have to respect everyone else?
Lourdes, todo el que necesites, no tenemos hoy límite con vos.
Muchas gracias.
Take the
Em,
time you need. We don't have a limitation for you. Well, thank you for the invitation to look at the common good, the well-being and the interconnection with justice community, justice, climate justice, and also for the communities, especially here. I'm talking from the north of Peru. It's very interesting for us because we've been raising this issues for many years, this proposal. To understand these themes, we need to, as our ancestors have said, we need to understand that being and doing, from the Western perspective, being is often static and fragmented, and there's no conscious about the Pachamama, the Mother Nature, and we can look at nature as going to the park or going to the river, and we go out because that's where nature is. We categorize this as to various types, ecosystems. We divide ourselves between objects and subjects, between what is alive, what is inert, what is human, what is not human, between men and women, and amidst our diversity of age and color and so on. And we treat each other according to our own interest of control and power. And so many of the community feminists, we call this is our patriarchy, that we call as a system of domination, of control, of oppression, of violence and discrimination that has been built historically on the bodies of nature and the bodies of women. And throughout time, this has been strengthened with other forms of power and domination, such as colonialism. And particularly those in the South, we have suffered, and we continue suffering these vestiges, these forms of wanting to impose this way of viewing life. That gives a monetary value to life, to nature, There's racism to allow greater discrimination and to generate some group being superior over another based on the color of the skin. Fundamentalism that will utilize the Bible to help control the bodies and the life of women in our communities, particularly among the LGBT and indigenous and peasants and small farmers. So all these processes of domination and control would not be possible without the alliance between the patriarchy with the colonial alliance. And so the ancestral patriarchal systems and the colonial systems. This is part of the cosmo vision of our peoples, the indigenous and small farmers. We have much more. It was not, our view of the world was different, but it was not perfect. But we have to deal with our ancestors, but also with the history of patriarchy. And so this is the whole process for our people. It means we continue being. We're constantly in a dynamics of changing. We're in a process of transformation. As indigenous people, we see, we've survived through the colonization. We can understand how we live in an eternal present. We are living into this flow. Eternal flow also has its webs, its ebbs and flows. There's a process of harmony, but we also have processes that our actions generate reactions, have consequences. So this way of viewing life that was Eurocentric has impacted our countries also. So it's a struggle to try to regain and restore some of our cosmovision, our historical vision that we've had of how to see life in a more integral way, how to see what proposals can we bring for the way of the Eurocentric way of viewing life and all the various centrisms that exist has generated these problems that can lead us to this destruction. And so the whole climate crisis is putting in danger all of life, not just for us, but for nature itself. We know that in the long term, we can see the changes of the temperatures, the climate situations in northern Peru. We are suffering tremendous droughts, and these droughts and the forest fires that just a few months ago we were suffering tremendous inundations and floodings, and all this in the face of the historic resistance of the groups. But we also have the exploitation companies that come in for the mining and oil and lumber. And it's often as the women that feel first these consequences, these damages. We see when we no longer have water in order to clean, to wash, to cook with, to have this role that's been imposed on us of being historically, it's the woman who takes care of life. We also assume this role and this concern of taking care of life for our people, for our nature, and in our times. So we call these times, we call this the Pachacamac. We say that this the creator of the universe from our cosmovision, where when we talk about God, God is the creator of the universe. We know it under a different name. So we have different names, but it's the one same creator, the creator of the universe and the reforms. And we need to awaken the conscience of people. What we're trying to use is use these movements that the creator of the universe has created, these movements to help bring balance to the world. And the emergence of the women in the communities, the indigenous communities, and the LGBTQ and others the suffering that nature's having and our people, this is also generating a call, a cry out, call to attention that we need to transform these realities, to transform humanity and the world. First, we need to recognize the climate crisis that is happening that many don't want to refuse. We also need to recognize the violences that are happening over the bodies and lives of women in the communities of the LGBT, among the indigenous communities and others. They want to continue living in this capitalist logic, which puts a price on life and at the cost of others, the lives of others. So as to face these various crises and the violence, because the women are also living in a crisis of violence. We have proposed various agendas, the green agenda, the different types. We're talking about a process of transition, the transitions for justice, but justice for whom? As women, we're saying we continue being exploited. Before, we would say that one, within the focus on gender, we still have the disequalities between men and women among our diversity. That can be an instrument of analysis, but we also need to see the situation of oppression in which we're living. From this perspective, from the gender perspective, we can say there's disequalities between in the work field. We need to it's not just taking women out of their home, but we find the ways in which they can work, but they're working in many situations almost like in the slavery. So these are various different forms of oppression that is being utilized, that are the agenda as women, the agenda for indigenous communities. They often try to manipulate that to continue serving the purposes of capital, to continue serving the domination. So this is a questioning that we're making among our peoples. That's why we say justice for who? These transitions, just transitions, who's benefiting? In the North is imposing many of these transitions into our countries. When they talk about this, what is being implied? It's implying that the creation of solar panels, of the using of other materials that and we've always been focused on nature. We've been using others as a way of protecting life. This implies that there's new ways of extraction of our resources. Now they're talking about the struggle for the defense of for lithium and we're going to be using uh, the whole ecology is still being damaged, but in new ways, new technologies, and new manners to continue trying to control our people. Greater extraction of minerals, maybe different types of minerals for the newer technologies to so-called favor these just transitions that the North is imposing on us. So when we ask who benefits and who is living off of this, who is being favored by these changes? But these Eurocentric, Centros, Afrocentrics, and all these, we see the proposal of the territories is not just the extraction that we're fighting against, but we also have the criminalization and the violence, the colonial, racist, and patriarchal violence. We want to go back to our roots, to our center, to our source, go back to the divinity, connect with the Kunam Pacha, which is the cosmic awareness of life, of what is creation, and our part in this, that together working with charity, with compassion, in a community way, together with nature and Pachamama. We talk about gender justice and climate justice when we understand that being is at the heart of this. Being we exist in a temporary moment of time and space, but as beings, we continue being continue being. We say that we have influence in time and space with Pachamama, where that can be carried out, and this is for the source of life. So Pachamama is that space. Pachamama is not just the earth that we're using the soil. Sometimes we confuse that with the Alcamama. No, it's not just the soil that we're walking on or cultivating. Pachamama is the place where we produce that is the source of life, where we're also part of the Pachamama. The plants, the trees, the water, the sun, the moon, the stars, all of us are part of that Pachamama. So where life can be reproduced, and as reproducing itself in Pachamama, the source of life, we can need to understand that we are part of this whole process, and that life, even the land has life. The forests, the rivers have life. That's where the spirit is from a perspective of a Western perspective. They may say, God is in the water, God is in the forest, God is in the mountains. We are within us, God is within us also. And therefore, we need to care and protect and transform in order to live well for the good, for the common being, to be able to weave life, the web of life. And so in the north, they see the well-being, we call it the Ajin Causa. In the southern part of Bolivia, Peru, Argentina, Sumak, that is to live in harmony, live in balance, and to live with equity between the economy and the nature, to use what belongs to me and to return what does not belong to me. Use what I need, but return what I don't need so that others may be needing it. And so this reciprocity between men and women in midst of our diversity, as community feminists, we also are proposing these terms because our ancestors thought that reciprocity was only in these categories, but for us, as we need to talk about the diversity of persons, of women, indigenous, farmers, lesbians, just like men, gays, and others, all the diversities that exist among all of us, this community balance between the social relations, where the community and is the center. It's not the individualization, but the community's well-being. And for us, we build these principles or proposals within the well-being, the good living. One of the common good, we can see the Sanante and the Masindi are two principles for proportionality, and Yananti that has to deal with the complementarianess between men and women in amidst our diversity. Masinti is the complementary into similar beings, and also what we'd call parity has to also work with on other terms. We need to look at the Pachactata and the Pachamama, the parity, complementary parity between mother and father, creators of life. And so for us, God is not male, but neither is female. God is this complementariness between mother and father of things. And as we analyze these concepts, if we analyze these concepts from the Western side, it can generate certain antagonisms and create some fragmentations and create a verticalization of what it means of these concepts. But then we also have the principles of Hachimunai from the psychology of the Andean people, was the wanting to live well. But how can I live well if I'm mistreating others, if I'm discriminating against a woman, another person, another person who we may identify as gay or lesbian or whatever? Am I really living well? No, you're not. And so you're lacking this very basic principle of like the Achimunai. And if I mistreat nature, abuse nature, if I if I'm overexploiting nature, I'm also saying we cannot fulfill our basic principles of the well-being. And so this also affects us. We have the Indian chime, the power of knowledge and wisdom. They say that we need to have knowledge and wisdom to guide our horizons, to weave the web of life and not destroy it. The Ajimukyo is also no human being in the world should suffer because we have the organic nurturing, the right to food, to sustenance. We all have the right to sustenance, to food, the recognition of our own systems, our autonomous systems of reproduction, of distribution, and the consumption of our food has to be also agroecological so that it can be favorable to all. And this is based on the community work, the family work that allows us to sustain life and dignity of women in our communities and of nature. And so these principles are very key for us to question these this growing forms of viewing where the agro exportation, agro industry has grown, expanded tremendously. But this is an industry that doesn't bring food sovereignty to our people. But it's harming the future of our communities. Because future persons will then are being conditioned to, in order to have a plate of food in their home, they need to accept these other situations. No, we have to have the control of our own food production, of our own, to be able to be free. The Hapin Chikwe is relating to being healthy. It has to do with, it's connected to, if I'm well fed, if I have the basic foods that I need, then I can be healthy. But if there's the imbalance, I can make use, if there's an unbalance in my health, I can use the medicinal plants that are around me. I need to be healthy in order to be able to speak up and be able to speak of the well-being of the common good. If we don't have food, if we don't have the health, how can we really talk? We also have the Moose Week. We have the vision of the future, the cultivation of community relations. We are in a world that is globalized, where we are breaking apart these community relations, these social relationships. We are individualizing. And by individualizing life through aggression, through violence, through a lack of protection, there's no living and sharing with nature and with each other. So we see that the vision of the future is also the type of community relations, social relations we have in order to live, so that we can continue to reject the violence and the oppression. It's important how we live together. We are social beings and nature. And how do we recover the communication with nature, communication with each other, communication with Pachamama? How do we reconnect with our forms? How do we talk to the trees, to the rivers, to the water, to the world around us? How do we talk to our brothers and sisters around us in our community? We need to also have a mutual protection, these living together. We also have the principle of the Adi Rubin. The Adi Rubin is essential for us because it talks about doing things well, being creative, that strengthens the building of our communities, that the building our not just utilizing our people, but building together with one another, building our vision, this description of what it means to have well-being for everyone. And so we also have the Alajin Atampai, which is the good use of our internal power, the power that we have of where we use to satisfy our ambitions, our needs, our personal needs, and so on. This can create unbalance. And so we need to have wise use of our internal power to strengthen not just what I want for myself, but also to strengthen for my community, for my society is also important. Another, the principle is the onagin. That has to do with the reconnecting with yourself, to love yourself, to know yourself. And this leads us to love with freedom, to then be able to love others and to care for others. I need to know myself and love myself so that I can really love and care for others, to respect others, the otherness of the other people around me, to build this community. Another person is the Ajin Kawsay. That means living in harmony with self-sustaining nature. To rethink this with our people would be we live and share with nature, with the forest and the water. But Pachamama, nature is not only within the rivers and in the forest and in the outside natures, also in the urban centers. We also have nature there. We are living there. The cities are also nature, but they have to be self-sustaining. They need to guarantee the balance in our lives, in our communities, in our families. So these are some of the principles that we bring from our ancestors that have left us as a heritage that we can bring up, and we can bring it here so they can be part of this debate to help transform this. But this also implies that we need to generate processes. One, a process of depatriarchalization. We need and require to rethink our history, rethink the territory, and rethink what is our daily life. And how do we look at the patriarchy as something that an artificial system created based on the bodies of women, the sexualized bodies of women, and that is strengthened by the colonization. It's very important to move away from the patriarchal system, to decolonize. And for us, decolonization is a process of liberation of women and of our peoples. And for them, we need to start walking through the land of our thoughts, our words, and of our struggles, of our feelings, and the meanings, and how this is imposed and assumed. How is this being reproduced? So we need to decolonize this worldview that tries to see everything as commodities, but we're going to transform ideas, transform words, transform the meanings and feelings. I also heard my companion mention that this important connection between the plurinationality for us, the reclaiming our vision as women and as indigenous people, native peoples of Afro descendants, the communities that are here. Even though we need to defend our communities, our territories, there is a unity we have when we talk about justice, gender justice and climate justice. We say the two are really parts of the same. Pachamama and nature. If there's no justice, we as women are not. We're also being oppressed by some of these same systems, the patriarchal, capitalist, colonial. So we're all part of this unity, this web, and this liberation will come from women, from nature, and from our peoples. We cannot separate them. And so this is a process of awareness, a political process that is emerging from the memory both of our bodies and of our cultures. And so this Eurocentric process has as a political view, for us, our political project is our community. We need to name ourselves as women, as people, as indigenous, as natives, as peasants, as farmers, lesbians, gay, or whatever. We are all part of this. And this implies that we need to speak of justice for gender, for climate, that there be reparations, restoration, and transformation. If women, our peoples, and nature, all the peoples that are oppressed are not, we don't have reparations and restoration. We don't have this perspective of transformation, of changing the relationships between gender and relationships in the communities and relationships with nature. We cannot really talk about gender justice or climate justice. That would be impossible. This implies also that we need to think that to have gender justice and climate justice, we would need to think in one, respect and protect the lives of the rights of people that live with the forests, that our territories not be invaded, not be exploited, to understand the causes that of how do we deal with the free commerce, free market, because this is generating greater extraction of our resources, greater destructions in our communities. We also need to protect and care for the rivers and the lands, the forests, to slow down the expansion of the agro-exportation industry. And it's very important to support agriculture at the small scale, the small farmers, the social relations in the community. And we can look at public transportation, the hydroelectric, and the use of the hydrocarbons. It's urgent that we need to slow down the mining extraction in our lands, where otherwise we're going to find desert lands. And also we need to struggle for water. If we don't have water, how are we going to live? It's important for us, it's very important for us to, from the community justice sense, to be a woman of authority in my community. And there are many of us, we need to dialogue with men who are also in authority to find how can we change these relationships of gender within our communities. How can we recover the historical memory of the forms of relating between men and women within our community, find a new balance for the gender justice? How do we care for men and women? How do we care for the diversity within our community so they can feel well as they can develop fully? This implies that when you find the common good, the common care, this is part of our ethics and our politics. We have this as a constant process that have different indicators within each of our peoples in different lands, because each one, we need to have this vision of resist, exist, transform, and have life with dignity, with the lights of women, of communities, of our lands, of nature, is to break away from the system of oppression and to put at the center the care for life in all of its expressions. This is important for us, and from feminism in the communities that we are, as part of our organizations and struggles, that we are proposing that in face of all these systems that they're violating our lands, our bodies, we see we need to recognize and rethink and to strengthen our cosmovision, to dialogue with each other from our ancestral communities, and to also gather what supports we have from what can we use from the Eurocentric cosmovision, but we also need to rename our opposition to what we need to struggle against that deals with that creates these categories and distinctions and differentiations that we need to fragmentize us. And so we need to break away from those systems. But we also cannot just reduce life down to the equality of gender or only the struggle for the rights of women. We need to struggle for a different way of life, where women and the communities and nature are at the center, and that we can have this at the center of our political struggles and movement, because we understand that women in our peoples and our community, the LGBT, the forest, the rivers, we're all part of nature. And that's why we speak of a feminism that's decolonized, anti-patriarchal, anti-capitalist, anti-racist, and that we also are aware of the challenges, that when we speak of these challenges of focusing on what is the local, the community, what's the national, and to the global, together with our brothers and sisters from different parts of Latin America and the world, we need to propose other ways of living, starting with decolonizing feminism, decolonizing our way of seeing life, and let's look at our lands and our territories, which is different than what we have been taught by the Western world, that we need to work and work. But we also need to be aware that as part of nature, there's this symbiotic relations, the dynamic relations of how we live and how we coexist. And the complexity of the patriarchy has been woven into our bodies, into our lands, into our territories, and also into our resistance, our struggle as women, as a community from the LGBTQ and others, that we help reproduce this patriarchal system. Sometimes we reproduce that in our own life. We reproduce some of the fundamentalism as young children. We are from our cribs, we are being told that this is the way life is, and we need to dismantle some of that to understand the complexities of how our various systems interact with each other, how our bodies are part of that system. And our political proposal then is that we need to extend the web of life, the well-being, the good. Nothing is static. Everything is in a process and transitions. It's a dynamic process, not a static process. We are not fixed in one. We must be aware that our peoples and women of our diversity, we need to start doing. We need to start by being and not just existing. And so I want to thank you very much for allowing me to be here with you and to share. If there's any questions, I'm here and I'll be glad to. I hope I can make myself clear, because there are many different categories here, and sometimes not all people understand what we're trying to communicate.
Lourdes,
Thank you.
thanks a lot for your presentation. It was marvelous to hear you. We understand a lot of your concepts and a lot of your knowledge, and I think that it's really important in an international space to talk about it and to understand feminism in a much more complex way than what we are used to do it. I think that you talk a lot about really important things. For example, that we need to be ourselves healthy to talk about el buen vivir. And if there aren't people that are healthy, which is el buen vivir del que estamos hablando. So for me, phrases like this, or to understand the intersectionality of our realities, and talk about also that talking about feminism is not only a fight for women, but a fight to create a different world. It's really important to understand in which way we as a region create our policy. So thanks a lot for sharing this stuff. I think that it's really, really useful, not only for Latin America and the Caribbean, but for all the world to start changing our perspectives about colonialism, about Eurocentrism, and about how to live. It was really beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so now we Latin American and the Caribbean think that this policy is a precedent for all the rest of the regions of the World Student Christian Federation. So now we would like to invite to the other regional secretaries to talk about what they think about this policy so that we can create a dialogue and try to start thinking about new ideas to implement similar stuff in our own contexts. Sorry, I was mute. So maybe we can start talking about this, and I will ask all our other regional secretaries to start talking about our policy and about your own context in matter of gender justice.
Thank you. Let me turn on my video. Thank you, Monica, and thank you, everyone. And thanks to the presenter for a well-elaborate presentation. It speaks to what we envision as WSCF, especially in light of the understanding of the gender justice policy. I like precisely how the presenter has tried to bring to light the link between gender justice and the environment. And for us, especially in African context, that is very, very cardinal, because we believe gender is an issue of Ubuntu. It is about being. Ubuntu is an African adage that speaks about I am because you are. And this speaks to the understanding in terms of the gender justice policy that women are because men are, and men are because women are. And that being the case, we go beyond understanding of just human beings to the understanding of the earth as the womb, as the mother of all creation. Everyone is dependent upon the earth. Everyone looks up to the earth for a livelihood. And that makes the earth very, very important. And the understanding of the earth is not just land, but it is about all creation. That is the land, the animals, the grass, and everything that is on the earth as interconnected. And that makes the principle of Ubuntu to be very, very, because it speaks about interconnectedness and realizing that theology is one of the tools that WSCF uses to bring about peace, harmony, and justice. Even in the sense of theology, it becomes a very, very important aspect, as creation is in Scripture, Christian Scripture, understood to be interconnected. I also am delighted to see that the speaker also spoke about the need to decolonize. And I think we also need to decolonize our understanding of gender, because each context has got its own understanding of gender. And that being the case, we need to understand gender from our own context so that we are speaking to what is the reality with the people, something that speaks to the people. And in talking about decolonization, decolonization in the sense of gender, it is very important to look at what are some of the tools that have been used to colonize. And again, the Bible is one of the tools that has been used to colonize and to change the views of people. That being the case, it is also important to decolonize Scripture itself, to decolonize the Bible, And one of the ways in which we can do that is perhaps by taking on the principle that theologians are currently pushing forward, and that is reading the Bible with a sense of unhiding the faces of women. This comes from understanding that scripture was written from a background that was a patriarchal society. That being the case, the face of a woman is hidden, and we need to unhide it. Even in the present day African context, in terms of ratios, we have more women than men. But however, in terms of decision-making positions, we have more men than women. And it is important that we change the narrative. And in changing the narrative, it is not about looking at people because they are women, but because they can do it. They have the capacity. Perhaps as we talk about that, being a gender policy, we also have to be careful on the flip side of the coin, because when we talk about women's rights, overlooking men's rights, we'll find that it will be the reverse of the patriarchy, and we are going to have matriarchy ruling the world, whereas the intended goal is to have harmony, and it is to have a situation where no gender is above the other, where all are working together, where the principle of Ubuntu is actually working. Also, one other important aspect is the aspect of commodification. Commodification, in this sense, in terms of gender, I think as activists and as advocates, we need especially to fight against commodification of women. Sometimes it makes my heart to bleed, where you see even an advert of a car, for instance, they put a face of a woman. And such commodification of people is something that we need to speak against, and see a society where women are not just a commodity, but they are respected as dignified beings, where all people are respected as dignified beings. And I think I'm glad that the presenter also spoke about the principle of understanding God, where from his background, God is not a male, is not masculine, is neither male nor female, but it is complementary of the characters of a mother and a father. And I think that is the sense also we find in an African setup, where God is not just understood as a male figure, but God has got both attributes of a man and attributes of a woman. And one very important thing that is in an African sense is the understanding that the earth is the mother of all. We all come from the earth, and if the earth is our mother, we are all united, because the earth is regarded as very, very significant. No one can exist without the earth. That makes, I can say, the earth to be more of the source of creation. And since it is the source of creation, in a sense, it deserves to be respected. And that is why we find African, indigenous Africans revere the earth and revere natural resources such as the rivers, such as the trees, such as the mountains, the oceans are revered because of that attachment that we have as indigenous people. And talking about indigenous people, in the fight for gender justice and justice for all, indigenous people are some of the worst marginalized who need to be helped to get to fit and speak for themselves. And that all points again to colonialism, where, for instance, the language of the colonial master has become more important than the local languages. to an extent that some of the local languages are dying out every day, week in, week out. A language is being lost. And a language is somebody's identity. And because we are talking about identity, the identity of certain people is undermined, and identities of other people are seen to be more important. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Monica, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Morgan. I think that all your perspective that you are talking about Africa reality, it's really powerful, and we can have a lot of similarities between Latin America and Africa. So thanks a lot for all your knowledge. Then I will ask Jawanda from Asia Pacific to start talking about gender justice in her context.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Lourdes, for such an inspiring presentations, and thank you also for the opportunities to respond and for those inspiring presentations from you about the gender justice policies, and then from Lourdes about the Buen Vivir. So I'm gonna, because like I heard a lot of new words. So I'm going to read through some of my notes. Please allow me, because I learned a lot. Thank you very much for arranging these webinars. Well, of course, first of all, I would like to congratulate WSCF Latin America and Caribbeans on the launch of the policy of gender justice and inclusion for El Buen Vivir. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing all of those words in a really bad pronunciations. So the principles shared, such as this is what I see from Camila's notes, such as Yananti Masinti, or proportionalities and complementary, and then Alin Munay, to love well, and Alin Kawsay Kula, living in harmony with nature, actually provides a holistic framework for justice, inclusion, and sustainable living. And well, in my context, or sorry, there's a pop-up, confirm your speaking language. Okay. In the Asia Pacific context, while our context and challenges maybe differ, but these principles resonate deeply with our works. For example, the emphasis on Sumak Muskui, or cultivating the relationship, nonviolence, and mutual protections. It is aligned closely with our programs aimed at addressing conflicts and building peace, like in countries like Myanmar, who nowadays still suffer from the military coup. And also similarly, Alin Rurai, the call to work creatively and collectively for community well-being, reflects also the spirit of student movement in our regions, which are advocating for gender justice, human rights, and ecological care. And I am particularly struck with the focus on Munayiyup, or the ideas of reconnecting with oneself and practicing self-love in freedoms. I don't know whether I got it correctly. I'm sorry if I got the sentence wrong. But I think that is an important reminder that gender justice must not only address external inequalities, but also nurture inner strength and resilience, especially for young women and, of course, for marginalized groups like LGBTQ groups and all of these indigenous peoples that facing systemic oppressions. And this policy also challenged us to root our advocacy in values of inclusions, harmony, and interdependence. It is also inspires us to draw more deeply from indigenous wisdom in responding to global challenges like environmental degradations, gender-based violence, and socio-economic inequalities. Well, congratulations once again to WSCF Latin America and Caribbean for this significant achievement. This policy is a powerful step toward fostering inclusive and sustainable communities, and I really look forward to learning from and collaborating on its implementations. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda. A pleasure having your reflections. Now, we will ask all of the participants to write some questions in the chat or to open your micro and tell some questions to Lourdes, to myself, or to Morgan and Yolanda so that we can answer them. We will like to listen to you. It's your space. Well, maybe while we wait for your questions, I can speak a little bit more about our gender policy. So as I had said before, our gender policy was created in a collective process in which different representations of the youth communities of Latin America and the Caribbean were involved. Our meetings were via Google Meet, and after that, we start creating this collective process. It was really, really interesting, and it involves a lot of effort of all our different youth communities. So for us, it's really important also to thank a lot for their time spent in creating the policy. It was a really great space. We learned a lot of new things, and we end up understanding much better how we can implement our policy. It was also really important for us doing it this way so that we can achieve also the relationship with the policy and that it can be practiced. So if all our jobs were involved in it, it's really, really much more easy to start practicing the policy because they understand the policy as our policy. So it's better for the implementation process all this way. And I don't know if anybody of you have any question to Lourdes or to me about all this process. Be free to ask it. We have some question. Jacqueline is asking, Lourdes, desde tu experiencia como mujer indígena, ¿cuál crees que son los
From your
desafíos?
experience as Indigenous women, what are some of the most concrete experiences? What do we need to do to really make this effective, this policy?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Fíjate que es dentro de los muchos desafíos que tenemos,
We have many challenges
para superar, hacer realmente esta
to overcome, how to make this effective. First, we need to reconnect each other. When we talk about reconnecting and recover our memory, recovering our identities, when I talk about identity or rebuild our identities, it deals with we in the territory where we are, we recognize who we are, why are we here, what are we here for, that we are part of a community. We are wherever we may be living. So starting from there, we can then start beginning with this policy, politics of building together with each other. We say that we, among our people, first we would need to reawaken our awareness of our connections. The first challenge is to awaken our conscience, this awareness of the community, which is so vital, and this awareness that allows us to understand that we are part of creation and that each one of us, each part of this creation, we are called to live in harmony, even though we are out of balance, out of harmony right now. But we need to then, but with that awareness, we can try to seek greater parity, have greater communication. And so this is part of what we call our cosmic awareness. So first, we need to awaken our cosmic conscience. Then having the help from Mother Nature, from all that is happening, all that we're living, all the situation of violence that's happening on the body of women, the violence against our communities, the LGBT, the violence against nature. This is also forcing many people to connect each other, to become more aware, saying this is not right, this needs to change. And then we need to start a phase of acting as a community. We cannot do things alone. We need to be connected to each other, to be articulated one another in order to bring about change, to change the life, our lives and the life of others. If I cannot be, others are not either. And so we need to work together. So I think that's the greatest challenge we have, as I see in the question.
Thanks a lot, Lourdes. I think it's really important what you are saying, and I think that we are going to implement or try to implement in our context so that we can really apply our policy. Thanks a lot. I don't know if somebody else have another question towards some of the panels. We are going to be glad to answer to it. We have another question for you, Lourdes. So, thank you for this session. I wanted to know, is LGBTQ in harmony with nature in your evaluation? How do you draw at the gender policy on a very fluid and constantly shifting components of the LGBTQ? Okay, maybe I can answer it because it's towards gender policy, or that's what I understand. Well, as I have said before, for Latin American and Caribbean region, LGBTQ reality and activism, it's a priority. So we constantly do a lot of activities toward this theme. We do a lot of activities also in a religious or in a spiritual perspective. So for us, it's really important to say that it's not a contradiction to be queer or LGBTQ and Christian. And in our youth communities, it's also really important not only to create spaces in which we can dialogue about the theme, but also to start having difficult conversations. So we have a lot of workshops and a lot of activism in the streets about it. For example, in many of our regions, and in many of the countries of our regions, we go to the LGBT strike in June. So these kinds of actions are really important because we get a contundent perspective about LGBTQ in religious spaces. Also in our policy, we understand diversity in a huge way. So we involve the justice toward LGBTQ community, and we understand it as a prophetic word in our times. So for us, it's really important to practice this prophetic space and to start practicing justice, not only for women and girls, but also for LGBT community. And as we have said before, also in our way of living. So we understand, or we try to understand, gender justice in a much more complex way than what is traditionally understood. We have another question. Alex says, what shall we do as Christian if a transgender is rejected in our society? Well, Alex, I think that it's really important to understand that as Christians, we cannot reject any people. We need to love each other, no matter in their gender identity or their sexuality or their race or whatever things. So I think that it's important to accompaniment each other with love and tenderness. I think that it's also a really difficult approaching towards our complex realities. Here from Latin American Caribbean, for example, we need to deal with religious fundamentalisms and a lot of other human rights violations to LGBT community. So I think that we need to be the prophetic voice of our times in matters of gender justice and LGBTQ plus community. I don't know if Lourdes want to say something else about any of these questions. Adelante, Lourdes.
Muchas gracias. Sí, de repente algo pequeño respecto a la
Thank you.
primera. Fíjese que, bueno, yo soy parte de una organización que es un
I'm
feminista,
part of an organization which is a feminist organization that's also international, but we're also here in the northern part of Peru. And in our organization, we have some of our leaders that are also lesbians that are part of other organizations, but we are aware that we are still in the time of reconnecting. For many of the communities, LGBT, they're also only connected around the recognition of marriage, the recognition of their particular individual rights. But they're still interiorizing a lot of who we are, that we all are part of this connection, that we require to be reconnected with each other, that they can mobilize, they can go out and do actions for their rights. They also mobilize themselves to defend the rights of water and the land and the territory, because without water and land, they're not going to survive either. So this is part of the debate we have with the community of LGBT and other communities. Also being able to, just as we will be with them in the struggles for their rights, but we also have to defend the transversality of these rights. And I think this is also part of the challenge, because we are learning, we are communicating, where we're in this transitions through life. We also are part of a collective of women theologians in Peru. And from this perspective, from the womanist theology, Indigenous, we also rely a lot, as we had mentioned, we do a hermeneutical evaluation of the Bible to recognize the women and the social factors in these societies that in our society today of Northern Peru. But we need to be aware that our cosmovision proposes all this, but the challenge still is that how do we decolonize our own cosmologies that the people are having, to understand that the LGBT community was also recognized by our ancestors, and that they also have existed and need to be recognized as such. And so we just wanted to comment this very briefly, but thank you for inviting me to this dialogue.
Thanks a lot, Lourdes. I think that it's really important what you are saying. I think that a lot of LGBTQ plus spaces are really Eurocentric and colonized, and I think that this is a must to change in all our regions. So I think that this approach that you are having is also really important to understand our fights and our activism as more collective spaces, as more collective and also intersectional. So thanks for all your knowledge. Well, I think that we have answered the questions. I want to thank all of you for your participation. I think that it was really rich to have all you here. Lourdes, Joanna, Morgan, and all of you that participated in this space, in this webinar. Thanks a lot about all of this knowledge that you have with us. And for the last, we will like that all of you turn your camera off so that we can have our photo and we can share this space with all our communities. So let's give some seconds so that all of us can turn on our cameras, please.
While we'll wait for you to open the cameras, we also want to share or invite you to revise the link that Marcelo sent in the chat. because of the last General Assembly in Berlin 2022, the WSCF approved a policy on transgender people. So we invite you all to check it. We will also share this link after this meeting with you all. Thank you all for opening your cameras. Let's wait a few more seconds because someone is trying to join the meeting now. So let's see. So on the count to 3, we will take the photo. Thanks, Belly. Melissa is also there, our regional secretary, WSCF Middle East. Now, this is a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So thank you to all of you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dawn, also for the interpretation, Lourdes, for your very special insights.